All right, let me know when you guys can hear me, both in the Moore's Law is Dead Discord, which of course you get access to at the lowest tier on Patreon, and then of course also in the live chat. And then I will get going with, well, there is a lot to discuss after being off for a couple weeks, I gotta say. Duh. I scared you. Well, I'm sorry about that, Exo Calibra. Still waiting for confirmation I sound okay, everybody. Oh, right. All right. I see one person in the Discord says I sound okay. Another person says good. And there it is. I guess an extra delay this time around. Sorry about that, though. But I always have to check that to make sure we don't hit the ground running and it just isn't working. All right, then. So, yeah, welcome to the, well, end of December, end of 2024 loose ends. This is, of course, where I go through any questions people had over the past month, questions people might have for me over the next month, and just prove that I don't have anything to hide. Any questions you have, I'm happy to answer. And let's tie up the loose ends with everything that's come out over the past month. And actually, quite a lot has happened over the month. It was funny. I remember, most of my family lives up in Minnesota. So me and my girlfriend drove to Minnesota for Christmas. I think it was like just even like Christmas Eve or even the day before Christmas Eve, like the day after I stopped working, and all the stuff about RX 9000 series and yada 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 was coming out, stuff about Blackwell. And at first I was like, God, I almost wish I worked one more day to do a video about this. But then just more and more nonstop stuff kept dropping on like video cards and WCCF. And I went, actually, I'm glad that I'm not working, because every day the info keeps changing. I'm just gonna wait. And certainly, yeah, I remember on Christmas Eve I got some info about the RX 9000 series, and then more info later during the break. And so I thought, why try to rush out a video during vacation? Let's just, right when I get back, which is today, let's go over everything that my sources have been telling me while I was celebrating the holidays. And so let's get right into it then. Let me put down a timestamp here. I'm going to start with the RX 9000 series. Yes, that is what it will be called. RX 9000 series stuff with RDNA 4. And let me see here. Let's just go right to the leak deck. All right. So, as a reminder, if you haven't been caught up, this video here, pretty much everything I've said about performance holds true. But moving on to the new info, this is what I've been able to accumulate over the past couple of weeks. Basically, yes, the naming is correct. There is going to be the 9070 and the 9070 XT. And the performance that I've already leaked sounds like it really hasn't changed. At least around a 7900 XT or a 4080 in rasterization performance, which I also have this handy as well. Oh, great. Good job, Tom. Let's see here. Which I also have this handy as well. So I think that a lot of debates that are going to happen about RX 9070 XT performance, if some people dispute the performance in raster, a lot of people are going to forget that actually in the latest averages, the 7900 XT, as you can see here, is only 10% behind the 4080. That wasn't really true at launch in pure raster, but it is true now. That is how things have aged. And the 7900 XTX is actually, again, a solid 10% or more faster than the 4080, even super. And so when you see me leak things like, let's see, when you see me leak things like around 7900 XT raster, maybe around the 4080. That is weaker than the 7900 XTX in rasterization performance. The XTX slightly faster is the highest I could see it going, but as long as it's within 5% of the 4080 or something, that's pretty much what was leaked 3 months ago. And the ray tracing performance really hasn't changed either. I'd say at least around the 4070 Ti, or maybe better than the 4070 Ti Super, which again, I think we have to remind everybody like where performance is. The 4070 Ti Super really wasn't that much faster than the normal 4070 Ti when VRAM wasn't an issue. It was really within like what, 10%, 15% of the same performance. It was really just the VRAM buffer that made the 4070 Ti Super better. And so if I go back to this information though here, Yep. So performance that I've leaked really hasn't changed in that ballpark. It should launch late January. So that's the first source, a major retailer. The second source here showed me documentation. I think this is interesting. Documentation that the 9070 XT 16 gigabyte and 9070 16 gigabyte should launch on or around January 23rd. Now, this source and me, I don't know, maybe who knows if there was maybe some sort of typo where they just left XT off of the model numbers. But I'm saying I've seen documentation listing release dates for AIB cards that have 9070 XT 16 gigabyte, 9070 16 gigabyte. So I think it's unlikely that there's typos there. And to me, it sounds like at a minimum, the 9070 is shipping around the same time as the 9070 XT. Of course, it's plausible that AMD could ship the cards at the same time, but launch one of them a week or two before the other. I wouldn't rule that out. But I don't think that they're going to be as far away from each other in a launch as initially thought. And I'm really excited to see 16 gigabytes there for the 9070 because I've seen rumors about a 12 gigabyte 9070 that never really made sense to me. I think we all know that the 7700 XT having 12 gigabytes, well, the 7800 XT had 16 gigabytes was silly. It made it really odd to segment the 7600 XT. Like any 12 gigabyte card should have been like an OEM 7700, kind of like the 6710 gigabyte. And so I'm really excited to see that. Because if you think about what I've just leaked here, that AMD has something that's, shall we say, kind of like a 4070 Ti Super, maybe even a 4080 if everything turns out well. If they can have that card with 16 gigabyte at $500, and then there's another 16 gigabyte card, I think it's plausible they have 7900 GRE performance or close to that for 450 again, but without the ray tracing deficit that we've seen for so long with AMD graphics cards, where you have to have this caveat where you're just like, oh yeah, sure, the 7800 XT is like, whatever it was. I think it was like 10 to 15% faster than the 4070 while being cheaper. But then you go, well, if you turn on ray tracing, though, technically the 4070 is around the same performance or faster. I think it's very exciting to see that we will probably have a $500 card that gives you what was $800 or better performance, including in ray tracing. And then the cut down version that I'm guessing will be 450, 400 at the cheapest. That will also have 16 gigabytes and probably bring like, I don't know, 4070 super ray tracing. I'm guessing here 4070 super ray tracing with 7900 GRE raster. That's good. That's very good. And that's most of what I have to say about this is that whether it ends up closer to the 7900 XT, even slightly weaker but better ray tracing, or whether it ends up closer to the 4080 super full stop and performance, I don't think that really matters if it's 499. If the 9070 XT is 499, whatever, plus minus that 10% or 20% performance, that's still going to be at least 30% uplift in price performance. Having said that, if AMD tries to, because I don't know, AMD won't know the pricing they're going to charge until they walk on stage with the final decision. But were AMD to choose $600 for this thing, I don't know. I mean, that's where it's going to depend where it actually ends up. You see, if they charge $600, so 20% more than the 7800 XT's MSRP was, which let's remember, the 7800 XT sold for more than the MSRP for like the first half of its life. But were they to go with like $600, it will depend, right? Because then if it's like 7900 XT, but less RAM than the 7900 XT, but better ray tracing for 600, it's not really more than a 10-20% improvement over just a 650 20 gigabyte 7900 XT that you could have bought a couple months ago. But if it ends up like 7900 XTX performance with 4080 super ray tracing, then I even think $600 is warranted. But either way, this at a minimum seems like quite a technological achievement, unless there's some surprise like the 9070 XT's die size is like, I don't know, 400 millimeters squared. And again, I don't think it will be. I've heard around 300 millimeters squared, remember, for a long time now. If it ends up at 300 millimeters squared or get smaller than that, like some rumors have suggested, I think we all need to acknowledge what an accomplishment AMD has made with RDNA 4. If that happens, again, if we have to see final third-party reviews as always, but because if they do achieve anything close to 4080 performance, AMD's managed to do that with a die size probably 20 to 40% smaller than the 4080, while not even using GDDR6X or GDDR7. With bog standard GDDR6 and a smaller die size, if AMD manages to get even close to a 4080, that tells me something's firing on all cylinders at Radeon right now. And that'll make me go, well, maybe it's good they canceled big RDNA 4. You know, if canceling big RDNA 4 allows you to make a couple dies that beat Nvidia in die size efficiency while offering similar ray tracing, then screw it. Just leapfrog designs, do only mid-range every other gen and do the high end when you can hit a home run like you did with RDNA 2. But otherwise, yeah. So I guess that's really all I have to say. Again, let me show it one more time, just summarizing the leak. Yep, RX 9000 series is happening. There's the 9070 XT and the 9070 right now. I have not heard any mention of a 9060, 9050, you know, Navi 44 smaller die launching soon. And the performance hasn't changed from what I've leaked. Somewhere around a 7900 XT, maybe a little weaker or stronger, and up to 4080 in raster and 4070 Ti or better in ray tracing, possibly even getting close to the 4080 sometimes if optimized for AMD. None of that's changed, and it should be launching around January 23rd. At least sounds like they're shipping both of these at a similar time. That is to say, both of these being the 9070 XT and the 9070 non-XT, and both seem to have 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is very, very exciting. All righty. So now I actually want to move on to another leak. Like I said, we have a lot to cover here. Let me just zoom out a little bit so I don't act stupid again. All right. All right. So now let us move on to the NVIDIA information, everybody. Let me put down a new timestamp for the future viewers, because I actually have even more Blackwell information today than I have RDNA for information. Of course, change the lights so I'm super special. Okay, so as a reminder now, everybody, I have leaked NVIDIA Blackwell pricing a couple of times now. Now, the first video that I would point to, again, if you wanted to go back and recap what I've said, was this video on screen here, where I divulged what my sources were telling me about RTX 5000 series pricing. And that is to say that this was the price range that they expected: a 5090 32 gigabyte that costs decently more than the 4090, a 5080 16 gigabyte that costs the same or more than what the 4080 did, and then a 5070 12 gigabyte that's probably close to what the 4070 launched at. Then, of course, some sort of 5070 Ti will presumably be in there as well. So that is what my sources told me. And then in addition to that, before the break, I also put out this video here where I divulged, of course, new 5080 laptop specs, and also just made the overall argument for why my initial leak was probably correct. Because there's two ways to go about information. I can tell you what retailers, people at Nvidia, and Nvidia's partners are telling me about pricing, but that's a little bit of a trust me bro leak, right? Or I can go, okay, forget the sources. Let's just lay out why they would price things the way they would logically without any sources, and why someone online saying there's no way they would increase the price of the 5090 over the 4090. You know, like, part of that was me explaining, well, it is using GDDR7 and 32 gigabytes instead of 24 gigabytes and a larger die size. No, they're definitely going to charge more, right? You don't even need a source to know that. And that is what I outlined in this video that you're seeing on screen here. But I've gotten more information since the break, so let us move on to that. And here you go. So there's a lot of stuff in here, including exciting things about the 5060 in addition to pricing. I'm just actually going to read the sources on screen here now for you all. So the first source told me that the pricing, and this is an NVIDIA partner, told me a few months ago for that leak already mentioned, still sounds accurate. However, they caveated to me that at least in practice, it seems like the RTX 5080 will be on the more pricey end of the spectrum. So if you will remember what I leaked, everybody, right? There was a range that they were considering here. It sounds like it's, yeah, probably going to be $1,200 or more, but I could see the MSRP being 13 or 1400. And again, remember, even if Nvidia's MSRP is 1200, what I can tell you is that there are AIBs saying they're preparing models that are quite a lot more than that. And so there's the, as we always know with Nvidia, but also with Intel, with Battlemage and their fake B580 pricing, there's the MSRP, and then there's the price you can actually buy it and find it at. And it seems like AIBs are preparing for the 5080 to be more expensive than the 4080 on average, at least at launch. Again, it's not really a surprise, I don't think, to anybody there, but if I go back to the leak slide here, that is what my source, this first source here, warned me, is that the 5090 is probably going to be a little more expensive, or not a little more, a lot more, actually hundreds of dollars more expensive than the 4090, but maybe in the middle there. The 5080 is probably going to be on the more pricey end of that spectrum. And then the 5070, 5070 Ti will probably be close to the original pricing of the previous gen, which is to say, because I do believe the 5070 will have 12 gigabytes of RAM, it would make sense to me just logically too, not even without a source, that they'd probably still charge $599 for this thing, considering RDNA 4 will be bringing competition to Nvidia in the mid-range, but not the high end. Same thing with the 5070 Ti. I think Nvidia knows it was a mistake to give the 4070 Ti only 12 gigabytes, and that is why they'll have a 16 gigabyte card for $799 out of the gate. At least that's what I'm hearing. All right, so source number 2 here. So this person told me that Nvidia reps had mentioned to them, this is an Nvidia partner again, that the 5060 was likely to launch in the second half of 2025, and that tentatively the plan is to have a 12 gigabyte model that offers performance between a 4060 Ti and a 4070, and then also an 8 gigabyte model that has less CUDA cores and offers performance that is better than the 4060, but probably not better than the 4060 Ti. And yes, it will have less CUDA cores. And this is something actually that I've been speculating for a while. Like, it was really, I would say up until now, mostly speculation that the 5060 wouldn't launch until well after the upper end of the series. It is informed speculation, though. I mean, I had people telling me no one's talking about the 5060 in any detail right now. So, but also because they want to sell off the low end first. That's where the speculation came from. But also that I just had this feeling that they're going to have a 12 gigabyte model, that Nvidia has to know deep down that there has to be a more than 8 gigabyte offering for the 5060 in 2025. And let's be honest, through 2026, when most of the volume will probably be sold of the 5060, it'd be insane to only have an 8 gigabyte offering. And that is what I am hearing here. And I'm of mixed opinions, if I go back to the slide here, about this leak from the second source, right? I find it hard to believe that there's a price where the 8 gigabyte 5060 will be recommended heavily by me. I just, even the 4060 was like a begrudging, I guess it's kind of better than the 7600 most of the time, around the same price. But I'm sorry, in 2025, 8 gigabytes, I don't think that model should cost more than 249. As usual, I do not like that Nvidia seems to be planning to have different CUDA core counts and RAM speed, and probably RAM speeds and RAM capacities for two things called the 5060. So let's put that in one bucket. I don't really like the 5068 gigabyte unless it was like $200 to be entirely honest. I'm sorry, it's an 8 gigabyte card in 2025. I don't think those should cost more than $200 anymore. Now the 12 gigabyte model, actually, that's a little bit different to me. Like, if you think about that, its performance should be between a 4060 Ti to 4070. I don't want to narrow it down too much because, it's still possibly 6 months or more away. Things could change, what RAM speeds they use, like what clock speeds they're able to pull off. But I would tentatively suggest that if the 5060 12 gigabyte manages to be 10% faster than the 4060 Ti, not promising you it will, but I think it should edge out the 4060 Ti. If it manages to be 10% faster, that puts it in 7700 XT range. And I think I actually have this slide prepared here. If you actually look, the 7700 XT is like a full 26% faster than the B580. So if they manage to charge, $350 for this thing, and that would therefore only be like 40% more expensive. I don't know. I could kind of see that being okay and selling well. Again, I'm not saying that this would be the best product ever, but if Nvidia brings out a card this gen that is the same VRAM capacity and the same performance as a 7700 XT, but is $100 cheaper than the 7700 XT launched at, and also uses less energy, probably with much better ray tracing, I don't know. At 350, I don't think that's the worst thing, actually. I just think the 8 gigabyte model is going to be hard to recommend in 2025. And again, it all depends on the price. If Nvidia charges $400 for this, and then like the 9070 16 gigabyte ends up being $400, no, I'm not going to recommend it. But I think at 350, you're getting something that's probably 30% better around than the B580, which let us all remember that the B580, though Intel is pretending it is a $250 card, it is not a $250 card, as I've warned you all many, many times here. Like, I just checked again today. Like, if you want a B580, this is what you're paying for a B580, people. And you can sometimes find it at like one of the micro centers. Like there's not even a lot of micro centers that even got this thing, like for 280 or something. The second it's 280, if Nvidia has a card 30% faster for 30% more with Nvidia features, I think that's going to blow it out of the water. So we'll have to see. But yeah, that's what I'm seeing with the 5060. And of course, I'm still not done with this leak. So let me get right back to the slide over here. Da, da, da. All right, let's get to source number 3 here. This is from a major US retailer that has documentation. Again, I've seen the documents stating that the RTX 5080 16GB is going to launch on January 21st. I believe other people have leaked this too, or I thought I saw a headline saying that. And while I don't have or this person doesn't have access to the MSRP yet, again, looking at where AIBs are warning them some of their models will go, it seems like it's going to be $1,200 or more. And this, of course, corroborates what another source told me, that it's probably going to be at least the price of the 4080, if not more, maybe 1,400, 1,300 or something on average. And then if the fourth source here, oh yeah, and then I also can confirm that Astral thing, which I guess is basically confirmed by stuff online right now. But I was told that no more Strix, Asus is saying Astral. Anyways, source number 4, this person works at Nvidia, told me that if the RTX 5080 launches first, now remember, if you're someone who works in engineering at Nvidia, you don't know what marketing or sales is planning to do with pricing or naming, but you do know the overall specs of the die, like when it seemed to be ready. This person told me that if the 5080 launches first, that they believe the 5090 is still planned to launch relatively soon. So in other words, if the 5080 should launch first, but if the 5090 does not launch in January, and it could just launch a week after the 5080 potentially, I would expect it to launch within a few weeks of it. Like that's kind of what it's sounding like to me. Again, could be wrong, but if it doesn't, that will be a choice. It won't be because Nvidia couldn't launch it then. And so let me see. I think that's pretty much it then. I mean, just summarizing everything. Again, the pricing I leaked for the RTX 5000 series, that range, I don't really have anything to change about it. Additionally, I'm hearing that the 5080 launches January 21st, which is interesting because that would be the same week that the 9070 XT and potentially 9070 launch. So it's going to be a very busy work week in a couple weeks. It's just, this month's going to be insane. There's going to be CES and then all of these launches. It's going to be crazy. And then additionally, the 5060 is probably launching second half of this year. The 12GB model, if it's priced right, I think could be okay. The 8GB model of the 5060, I'm sorry, 8's just the magic number of bullshit. I can't recommend 8GB cards anymore unless it's truly a budget entry level card. That's just where we are in 2025. I guess the final thing I would say is that I do find it interesting that the 5060 is planning to launch around Q3 or something, because I'm going to get to that after the ad break. That's kind of where I'm hearing a B770 would launch if Intel even launches it, suggesting to me too that Nvidia doesn't want to launch a 5060 outside of laptop. Of course, they'll launch to laptop for laptop sales, but Nvidia doesn't want to launch a desktop 5060 until AMD has what would it be, the 9060 XT, the Navi 44 products, or Intel launches a B770, and that it almost to me seems like they're saving the 5060 class for when the competition actually launches their stuff, which Nvidia does all the time. But all right, I actually do also have Battlemage information, but before I get to that, this piece of content is sponsored by Micro Center. Micro Center is having a winter savings event right now, and if you go through the links in the description, you can see all of their top deals. Additionally, there's a link in the description to sign up for early access to their Santa Clara location. You can get a free flash drive if you do so, and they also have a link below to the best AMD bundles and deals, which I don't know if you've looked around, like Mind Factory sales. I think from Tech Epiphany is the guy's name on Twitter. 9800X 3D flying off the shelves. Micro Center tends to have the highest availability of that and the best pricing for them. And so, yeah, look at that. Also, look at their PC builder where you can customize a PC on their website. Just like pick the CPU, the motherboard, everything, and then wait a couple hours, and the people at Micro Center will build it, install Windows for you. You can just drive in and pick it up without having to build it yourself. So, again, I want to thank Micro Center for sponsoring this piece of content. Please make sure you click the links in the description. And I genuinely do actually think now is a good time to build a PC. So, actually, I'm not just doing this because it's sponsored. I would also recommend you do that now if you need a new PC in the next 6 months or something. Like right now is probably when the prices on a lot of these CPUs is going to be best. Yeah, check out Micro Center today. All right, let me add another timestamp here. It's hilarious. We are almost 30 minutes into this, and I still haven't gotten to questions because of how much information that I have gotten over break. And this update here is going to be all about Battlemage. And I decided not to put together a leak slide for Intel Battlemage because I think I can just, verbally tell you what's going on with it. And that is to say, look, I don't decide to do this. I don't want to be negative. Videos do better on average if they're positive. That's why I'm excited when I tell you that AMD is probably going to achieve a decent ray tracing uplift and performance per die size uplift with RDNA 4, and that I do think Nvidia may be forced to be a little aggressive with a 12 gigabyte 5060. That's good news. Good news gets me better clicks, likes, and subscriber counts. But when it's bad news, I just have to report it. So let's get it over with. Right now, retailers are incredibly confused about Battlemage. Some retailers have gotten single-digit shipments so far. All these rumors about the big restock Battlemage that's coming at the end of December. Where is it? It's not there. It's because of what I told you. Battlemage has very, 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 very low supply. The MSRP is fake. And I talked to some AIBs and retailers just today and yesterday that don't even know when they're going to get B570 stuff that's supposedly launching in a week or so. It just continues to sound pretty bad. And really, the biggest bombshell that I had to drop for you today about Battlemage, I already hinted at it before, the B770. It continues to be up in the air if that's even launching, like if Intel will even launch anything close to a mid-range card. And if it does launch, I'm told that the soonest it could launch is in the middle of the year or maybe quarter three, because they're still having problems with it. So again, the Arc effectively canceled leak I put out continues to be true. A messy Alchemist launch, a reluctant Battlemade launch with very little support volume and maybe just one card or two, or should I say one die or two. It seems like that might happen. There might not even be a B770. If there is a B770, it's going to launch way too late to matter. And yeah, that's it. That's all I have to say about Battlemage. Retailers are still confused. No, I do not hear there's going to be a ton of supply that comes. It's going to remain a card that you can't get or is too expensive because it costs like $300 or more to make. And the B770 might not come out. If it does, it'll be very late. So there you go. Let's move on from that before the hate brigade and the copium Intel simps start attacking me again. God knows you guys have a lot of spare time to cope. And let's actually move on to some questions here that will be much more fun to answer, I think. All right. Also, hit the like button. There's almost 2,500 of you watching. Let's get to at least 2,000 likes, people. Please share, like, and subscribe to the channel. Please double check, you 2,500 people watching, that you're subscribed to the Moore's Law Z YouTube channel, because that really does help the algorithm in the channel a lot, just subscribing. All right. So the first question I have here that is a tipped question. And again, get those tipped questions in right now. I'll be doing this for like another hour to hour and a half. Don't wait. I will just go in order and I will get to your question as it comes. So you're not surprised when I stop, the live stream, you didn't get to ask it. Shaman writes in, let me make sure I didn't miss any other one because I thought there was a tip at the beginning. I don't know. Shaman writes in and says, Happy New Year. Happy New Year, Shaman. Any news on Rock'em or FSR4 or Switch 2? Well, those are three very different things. You said FS4, but I assume you mean FSR4. I'm not really. I mean, all the information I got that I just divulged to you is about Blackwell, RX 9000, and Battlemage for the most part, I think. Yeah. And I don't have really anything to say about the Switch 2. I've seen the rumors that the Switch 2 may use a smaller than 8 nanometer die. I've speculated for a while that could be possible. Again, remember the Switch 2, from what I was told by people at Nvidia, was ready to potentially launch like 2 years ago. I mean, it was designed with an 8 nanometer node in mind. Once you delay something 2 years, there is a part of me that's been saying, yeah, I don't know, maybe they'll die shrink it to something from Samsung. I've consistently heard that TSMC is almost certainly not happening, but no, I don't have anything else. Like all of the Switch rumors that have come out have pretty much been what I've said, the same specs, pricing, boosting really high when docked and then boosting really low to conserve battery life when on the go, but not really being a huge problem in Nintendo's opinion because it's just going to be on like a lower resolution screen. Using DLSS to upscale to 4K, even detail that it's going to focus on 4K DLSS output. That also seems to be true. Watch my Switch leaks and just know that I wouldn't be surprised if Nvidia and I guess Nintendo decided in the past year to die shrink it to 5 nanometer, considering how long it is taking to come out. That's really all I can say about it. Let's see here. Hi, Tom. This is from Nereal. Apologies if this is old news, but why is RDNA 4 being called the 9070 XT now instead of the 8800 XT? I still haven't forgiven them for the XTX shenanigans. Um, Let me write that down then. Let's do this here because I got a few questions from patrons as well. Which again, just $2 gets you access to, or $4 gets you access to the tier to ask questions on the live streams for free. And let me just ramble off those names right now, those questions right now. So Professor Next Gen also asks, is it true that RDNA 4 adopts the 9070 name? Yes. I think that is a very good thing. The exaggerated names of the 7000 series damage the brand. A 70 class name should restore confidence. Yeah, I suppose I agree. I like that they're going with 70, although I think 8700 XT is less random personally. Um, but I want to get to this. Clean Sweep writes in and asks, why did AMD think it was a good idea to completely overhaul their GPU numbering scheme for this generation? It would have made sense for their first UDNA generation, but it's only slightly easier for normies to compare against Nvidia. So Kari no Sugata, contributor to Moore's Law is Dead, actually had an interesting theory as to why they decided to go with 9000, because I do find it weird, right, that Nvidia would do this. Let me see if I can fix this quick. Off, yeah, execute, and on. Oh, that's weird. The Nvidia light won't turn off. Well, whatever, people. You're gonna have to deal with a green light behind me. Maybe that makes me a secret Nvidia shill, according to the theories out there. But anyways, Kari no Sugata had an interesting theory about this. So if you think about it, it seems like AMD is going to be real. I think AMD is really excited about Strix Halo. They're really excited about RDNA 4. They think they've really hit a home run here with the design. Whenever AMD does that, 290X, right? 290X beat the Titan, beat the original GTX Titan. The 5700 XT managed to almost match the 2080 while having a significantly smaller die size. Even if it would have been on 12 nanometer, it would have been smaller, and having a huge cost advantage. That's what they're going for again with RDNA 4. Very analogous to the 5700 XT. And I don't like it. I think AMD should pick a naming scheme and stick with it for like 10 generations. I think it confuses people that they keep changing it. But let's be honest, AMD keeps changing naming schemes anytime they think they have a home run, basically on a new architecture, which I think they do with RDNA 4. So that's why they would do it, because AMD does that all the time, number one. Now, why would they go to 9000? Because I think it's bizarre, right? If you're going to a new naming scheme, like what? 9000, that means it's already over. Like, why are you doing that? Well, Kari no Sugata pointed out that maybe UDNA is coming after RDNA 4, not RDNA 5. And so from that perspective, maybe AMD is like, well, we're on the 7000 series right now. And so we're going to use the 8000 series, 8040, 8050, 8060 or something for Strix Halo, because that's RDNA 3.5. But RDNA 4 is a generation better than RDNA 3.5, so that's 9000. We're going to sell Strix Halo with the 8000, RDNA 3.5, and RDNA 4 with, 9000 naming, because they're technically two different architectures at the same time. And then we're going to change it to 9070, so it sounds more like Nvidia. And then you go, well, then aren't they going to have to change naming schemes again next gen? Probably, but because it's UDNA, they're going to be happy to do it again. It's a theory Kari no Sugata at Moore's Law is Dead had. That's actually the best explanation I can come up with. One, AMD is insane and cannot stop themselves from changing names all the time. Two, they want it to sound more like Nvidia. 3.5 and 4, RDNA 3.5 and RDNA 4 will be sold at the same time. So they're going to get different generational names. Again, just like actually Nvidia did with the 1600 and the 2000 series. That's not the craziest thing to me. And the reason they don't care if it goes to 9000 is because maybe they're going to start over again when a UDNA launches. That's the best theory I can come up with. And it is just a theory. But I thought I'd tackle the ridiculous naming stuff here as like one whole thing. Let me write that down here. All right. Let me move on to some more tipped questions. Let's see. All right. And people in the Discord, let me know if I missed one. YouTube may have cut off some of these questions, but the The oldest one I can see here is from Spencer Walker 21, who asks, "All these GPUs sound awesome, especially when I'm playing Alan Wake 2 and Indiana Jones games on the Steam Deck OLED." Oh, I see. So this is a joke that you don't care about these big things if all you're going to do is play them on a handheld. Yeah, I mean, that's a decision you can make. But I do think, again, that means this is the perfect time for something like an RDNA 4 to happen. Again, I don't think people want more performance than a 4090, at least not as much as not as many people want more performance than a 4090, not even remotely as many as people want 4080 tier, including ray tracing and efficiency performance, to come down to half the price. And I think that's what AMD may achieve, which is exciting. Again, I want to outline why that's important, though. Like the 5090, let's say being 50, 60% faster than the 4090. Yeah, I don't know. That's going to be insane for ray tracing games and whatever. But that's not really gonna change what devs optimize to, and I think, like, the Nintendo Switch too, and things like the PS5 Pro launching at the same time as RDNA 4, that's gonna set a better baseline, um, for what devs will program too. Like, once Switch 2 comes out and it's gonna be like, I don't know, RTX 2050 performance, no, that's not great, but that's a lot better than like what MX 130 performance or whatever was in the Switch 110 performance. Like that means that the weakest of the weakest of the weak mainstream consoles, the Switch 2, still probably has a stronger graphics IP block than what's in the Steam Deck. Awesome. That means devs can really program for a minimum that's way higher than it used to be. And if you have mainstream $300 to $500 cards that are like 4070 Ti to 4080 performance, that means devs are going to go perfect. So we're targeting 4K 60 at this, and the image quality is going to be insane or something, and like down here the PS5 will be, and like now that can be relegated to just not pretending it's 4K anymore. I think this is going to be very good for graphics in games, more so than some $2,500 graphics card, or 2,200 has a ring to it for the 5090. We'll see what it ends up costing. Cole Meyer writes, and it says, "I heard that AMD frame gen update is doing really well on the Ally and Strix APUs. It's about time that technology benefits weak hardware." Yeah, again, I think that's exciting. And um, yeah, I don't have much to add to that. That wasn't a question. I agree. Thank you for the tip. Let me see here. Let me get back to some of these Patreon questions before I move over to the VRAM ones here. Let me put a new thing here. Let us put release timing VRAM. All right. So Multinatty writes in from the Patreon and says, "Happy New Year, Tom." Happy New Year, Multinatty. Obviously asking before the new leaks, but is there a chance that AMD is releasing RDNA 4 before Nvidia releases their cards? Feels like AMD always has been waiting to see what Nvidia does first before they make a move. If AMD truly does have a killer mid-range product, then they should release it first with conviction, regardless of the competition. Um, well, I mean, look, I've already leaked that they're basically launching at the same time. And if anything, it seems like AMD's launching a couple of days after the 5080. So the answer is no. They're not launching before them. Now, do I wish AMD would be more decisive? Kind of, but at the same time, like, I don't know. I mean, I think AMD and Nvidia looked around and said Battlemage isn't a real card. It's not going to be a threat. So let's let them pretend to launch it and let all of our stuff sell out. And if you didn't, check Amazon, Newegg, GPU bestsellers, Micro Center, Overclockers UK, I believe, Mind Factory, and you can see that Battlemage hasn't made a dent, like, really at all. And like I saw, like I just checked today on Newegg. I believe one of the Battlemage, the top selling Battlemage GPU is like 26th place, and then the second model that was like behind a 6500 XT. Like, so anyone who thinks it's selling well, it's like a 6500 XT 4 GB outselling the second highest selling B580, and the other B580 is behind just an army of 4070s and 7800 XTs. And I think Nvidia just wants those 4070s and 7800 XTs to sell out before they launch the new product line, because RDNA 4 especially is going to make everything in the RDNA 3 lineup pretty much redundant. Like, even if you have a 7900 XT, I've been telling you, don't get it anymore. The time to get it was when it was like $800 or less 6 months ago, and you're going to play it for like a year before RDNA 4 came out. Now that we're here, there's no point in getting that. it's going to be at least on average probably close to an XTX because it'll probably be better ray tracing with worse raster for a lower price, lower power consumption. I just think AMD knows that launching that while they still have all this oversupply didn't make any sense if no one's going to compete with them down there. So yeah, multi-natty. Decisiveness is a thing. I wish AMD would do. I wish AMD would be more decisive, but frankly, I think the release date, which let's be honest, what are we hoping? AMD launch this in October instead of January? I mean, I think that's going to matter less for a generation that will be sold for 2 years than if AMD actually goes for aggressive pricing. That's really what's going to be a more decisive thing there. Compressed AI Blocks writes in again and says, is there anything to indicate that Nvidia is concerned at all for low end and or mid range GPUs due to RDNA 4 and Battlemage? Almost not. Like, I suspect the 5070 12 GB will be 600. Could be 700, but I suspect 600. I think it would be 700 if RDNA 4 wasn't good. But because it might be 600, it wouldn't surprise me if RDNA 4 charge $600 as well, because it kind of sounds like AMD is going to have a card maybe 10% faster than the 5070 while giving you more VRAM. And if they do, it's hard to see why AMD needs to charge less than Nvidia, but who knows? DLSS 4 may be amazing, so they probably still will. So I think Nvidia is a little worried about that. That's why I think there will be a 16 GB 5070 Ti instead of 12 GB. Whether they're not going to increase the MSRP of the 70 class this time. But I don't think they care about Battlemage at all. Like, I really don't. I think, I think everything you need to know about what Nvidia thinks about Battlemage, and that they didn't do a single pricing adjustment when Battlemage launched, nor launched their cards. That tells you they don't care. Does AMD care? Again, I think maybe slightly. I bring it up, the B580, though. I think AMD is going to try to make the price performance curve at least be around 1-to-1 with their Battlemage is, and then go, remember, our card actually works. Our card has FSR4 support coming, if not, because I don't think it'll probably be ready at launch. Our card has the more stable drivers, which, I do have to actually point this out here. Let me, wait a second here. Well, I won't worry about it anymore. But I noticed that both Hardware Canucks and Hardware Unboxed had videos coming out pointing that Arc Battlemage has insane problems unless you have a $500 CPU, which who on earth is buying a $500 CPU for the king of penny pincher GPUs? No one. So I've seen it in reviews of Battlemage now on Newegg. There's people who bought this card and it wouldn't be insane, who have Zen 3. My rule of thumb is usually spend twice as much on the graphics card as you do the CPU. So like if you're only going to, and it's not a 1-to-1 rule, obviously there's some discretion involved, but like if you're only going to get a, I don't know, 4060 Ti or 7700 XT, or I think they're mostly out of stock now, but there was a while when there were RX 6800 16 GB for $350 or even $340. Like if you're just going to get that, I wouldn't get anything better than a 5700 X3D unless you're really planning for the future, because you don't need a stronger CPU to push that graphics card. And then it's if you get like a 7900 XTX, where it's like, well, yeah, get a 9800 X3D. You're spending $1,000 on your GPU. There's a lot of people, I'm sure, that just bought an Alder Lake i5. I've been recommending those a lot, by the way. Like those 6-core Alder Lake i5s you can sometimes get for like $100 at Micro Center. And if you paired that with Battlemage, it's not the thing you saw in reviews. And yeah, I don't know. I don't want to dwell on it too much again, but I'm not surprised this is emerging that there are pretty massive issues with the software at Battlemage again. King Goro writes in and says, hi, Tom. Any updates on Navi 48 with more than 16 GB of VRAM? In my opinion, a 24 GB or 32 GB flagship would make sense in 2025, even if it's just to win over AI and compute prosumer. Yeah, I don't know. I have heard, and I think there's other rumors out there right now, that RDNA 4 can clock really high, like above 3 gigahertz, maybe to 3.2 gigahertz. It is my opinion. Again, how many times have I said this? If AMD can get Navi 48, that's the top RDNA 4 die, if they can get a reasonable amount of golden samples to hit, I don't know, 3.2 gigahertz, if they can, especially if they can get access to faster RAM from Samsung ever of GDDR6, like 22, 24 gigabit per second, I would launch a 32 gigabyte card for like $700, because I'm sorry, I think if you have the golden samples 10% faster than a card that's already faster probably than the 5070, you can get something that probably gets close to a 5070 Ti or stronger than an XTX overall. And then with 32 gigabytes at 700 bucks, that'd be quite an offering to AMD enthusiasts. Are you going to get 7900 XTX people to upgrade to that 32 gigabyte special edition? Probably not. But would you get 6900 XT, 6800 XT, especially people to upgrade? I think you would. I think a lot of 6800 XT people would go, okay, well, here's this card that is like 60% more raster, double the ray tracing or more than double the ray tracing performance, double the RAM, and it's $50 more than I paid for a 6800 XT. Hell yeah, I'm getting this thing. I think that's how you could keep a lot of the AMD enthusiasts to not go over to Nvidia this time around. But I still have no proof of that. I've seen documentation of a 9070 XT, 16 gigabyte, a 9070 non-XT, 16 gigabyte. I've seen no reference to some 9080, 9070 XTX 32 gigabyte. But again, if they could make that thing match the 5070 Ti and then undercut it by like $100 with double the RAM, I think that would be a killer product that would make even a lot of 5080 people go, do I really want to spend twice as much for half the RAM and it's only 30% faster or whatever it ends up being? I think a lot of people go with that. But again, no proof of that. Complete speculation. My argument. I'm not saying that's happening. Compressed AI blocks writes in again. It says, do you think gamers will accept 8 gigabytes of VRAM in 2025? No. I think it's finally hit the mainstream gamer that 8 gigabytes is no longer acceptable, but we're still getting 8 gigabyte 60 class cards from Nvidia and AMD this gen, presumably next generation, unless AMD goes full in with 16 gigabytes. Yeah, I hope AMD goes with 16 gigabytes for the top Navi 44 product. Well, the answer is yes and no. My no answer is I don't think anyone in the mid range is going to accept 8 gigabytes anymore. But if I go to Amazon GPU bestsellers right now, just plain devil's advocate here, the best selling card, okay, 12 gigabyte 3060, 12 gigabyte 4070, 8 gigabyte 6600, 16 gigabyte 4060 Ti, 7600 XT. Wow, fifth best seller. Actually, AMD's selling pretty damn well on Amazon right now. 3060 12, 3060 12. Yeah, wow. I mean, yeah, maybe I was going to have a caveat. I don't know if I have it. I have to go. There is the 6600, which let's be clear, the 6600 can often be found for $180. I think at 188 gigabytes is fine. And my girlfriend has a 6600 desktop mini PC for minis for him. And my experience is it's actually okay. Like the 6600, assuming you're not paying more than like 190 for it. I mean, as long as you're okay with like she games in 1600p, it's like 1580p actually. It's a weird monitor I got her. But she can play Hogwarts Legacy high to ultra settings, 1580p, locked at 60 with a 6608 gigabyte. And this is a game that people complain about the VRAM with like FSR ultra quality mode on. And it looks great. I think it looks fantastic. That's what this is for, though. You're gaming around 1440p or higher with like FSR and high quality mode, or you're doing 1080p without FSR. I think 8 gigabytes still seems to be enough for that. It'd be hard for me to believe, but that's what all it's going to do. It's all it's going to do is give you like 1080p high, 1440p with FSR, maybe high in some games, other games medium, that. And so that's why it all comes down to price. So my caveat would be that it would not surprise me if the 5068 gigabyte were it to drift to 250 would still sell well. I mean, it has a 60 name in it and an Nvidia sticker, but I don't think anything else is going to fly. And when I look at Amazon bestsellers right now, top card 3060 12 gigabyte for 280, 4070 Super 12 gigabyte, then 6600. That's the only 8 gigabyte card. After that, 60 Ti 16 gigabyte, 7600 XT 16 gigabyte, 7700 XT 12 gigabyte, 3060 12 gigabyte, 3060 12 gigabyte, 7800 XT 16, 4070 12, 4060, and then you get to the 4060 in 11th place. So I got to imagine Nvidia is looking at that and going, we can't do 8 gigabyte for too much, and we have to have a 12 gigabyte offering. I don't think gamers are really accepting that. All right, let me go to this tips question. Jinx tips, thank you for the tips. Says, do you think Nvidia will open it up for AIBs to have custom VRAM configurations? They did it in the past. I loved my GTX 764 gigabyte. Yeah, that was a cool game. Cool card. He said I was able to play Arkham Knight without stuttering. No, is my answer. I'm sorry. I think Nvidia now has a stranglehold on VRAM and configurations. and they have their AIBs by a leash, and it's a tight leash. No, I don't think they're going to let AIBs experiment with VRAM capacity. I just don't. Um, Alderon Matt writes in with a tip. Thank you. Says thoughts on reviewers not covering GPU driver update lifespan when reviewing GPUs. Intel has a track record of abandoning GPU drivers at record rates. They supported some of their integrated GPUs for less than 2 years of driver support. Yeah, I don't know, man. Again, like the amount of cope around Battlemage, it's like it's not worth me, beating my head against a wall. I think the truth is coming out that you can't get it, and that it has tons of overhead and driver issues. That if you bought it for a budget GPU, put it in a budget system, it's giving you crap performance. It's a mistake to recommend it. I think it was malpractice to recommend it, and everyone attacked me for saying that. So look, Alderon Matt, I have nothing to add. You're pointing out that Intel tends to support a lot of their products for 2 years or less with driver support, and that's before they were going out of business. So, yep, I don't know. A lot of people want to put their head in the sand, though. Jackal N writes in and says, my heart says yes, but my brain said no freaking way that I will spend that much on a new 5080. With the Aussie dollar losing against the US right now, especially, it probably costs as much as my left kidney. Yeah, again, I think the world where the 5080, I wouldn't say it would be good. Let me put down a new timestamp here because I'm gonna start getting more into the pricing stuff. Like I'm not saying this would be good, but the world where I think Blackwell wouldn't be the worst thing. Let's just be honest. They're always going to charge at least $2,000 probably for the 5090 if it has 32 gigabytes. So let's put that aside and just know that there are people who pay $2,000 for a graphics card. They still pay $2,000 for 4090s to this day a lot of the time. And just talk about the 5080 here. If the 5080 16 gigabyte were to be like $899, $999, and give you 4090 performance, I could hear the argument, right? You'd be like, it's 4090 performance for 55, like, 5, 6, sometimes $1,000 less than what the 4090 usually sold for. Yes, it has less RAM, but it's $1,000. And if there was a 24 gigabyte version for like 1,400, 1,500, I could hear it. I know it's annoying that Nvidia is getting away possibly with upping the price on the 80 class that much, but were it to be 1,400 with 24 gigabytes, I could go, hey, look, it's $200 less than the 4090 was. It probably has better ray tracing, similar performance, same amount of RAM. Usually the 4090 was $2,000. That's at least a 20% uplift in price performance. Yeah, but no, I can't get behind it if it really does end up being 1,200 to 1,500 with only 16 gigabytes. I'm sorry, like I just like I think 8 gigabyte cards should be below $200. I think 16 gigabyte cards should certainly be below 2,000. I mean, below two, but below 1,000. I think charging. I mean, come on. I had a Radeon 7 that I got for $700 at the beginning of 2019. By the way, beginning of 2019. That makes that 6 years ago. 6 years ago, I had a 16 gigabyte card for $700. I mean, even if you adjust for inflation, that gets you to like what, 1,000? So no, I think 1,000 is where the 16 gigabyte limit should be, and any more is just silly unless it's insane. Like unless you had, the 5080 beating the 4090 by 30%. All right, sure, I guess maybe you can charge 1,200, but it's not going to, I don't think. And so yeah, I agree with you, Jackal. I don't know. It doesn't really interest me. That we've done that performance before, and removing VRAM, I don't think so. Let's see. Let me get to this question here from TechnoLads. He says, are you expecting international pricing outside the US to be as usual, aka a direct conversion between currencies plus sales tax plus 5% or so? Or do you think there will be a larger difference than usual due to Americans having tariffs? Well, we'll have to see what happens with tariffs before you can answer that. If so, will we see international pricing increase or be lower? Oh, it'll increase. I mean, once you increase with one country, other countries respond with more tariffs. And even if they don't, there's an arbitrage thing, right? Like if one, like it's the same thing with like oil. If oil prices in this country are $5 a gallon, and in this country they're $3 a gallon, you can't just go, oh, but it'll be cheaper here because it's $3. Over time, there will be arbitrage. People will take the $3 gallon oil and just smuggle it to the $5 a gallon oil country and charge $4.50 for it. So there's arbitrage means that once tariffs are enacted, it eventually ups prices for everyone. That's just a fact. All right, that's how things work. But let's put that aside because we can't talk about something until it happens. I think that's kind of a waste of time. There's not a plus 5% or so unless it has to do with like extra shipping costs to a country, which happens, if you're in a landlocked European country or, so like I know someone who like smuggles GPUs into the Balkans. Actually, I've talked to this person before, and it's like, well, yeah, like there's extra costs with going through the mountains and like smuggling these 1650s into like, but outside of that, I find that the European to US pricing is pretty much the same. I mean, people can say whatever they want, but like, let me see, overclockers.co.uk. Let me just go 9800. I don't think it's really in stock anymore, right? Is it marked up if it is? So what was the official price of the 9800 X3D? 800 X3D UK MSRP. Actually, Carrie No Sugata, if you're in the Discord, if you could tell me what the official United Kingdom MSRP was for the 9800 X3D, I would appreciate it. But what was it? Because I don't remember seeing it. Was it 450 pounds or 500 pounds? I think it was 449 when it first came out. Was that technically the price? So if it was, let's do 490 UK, no, BG, GP to USD. So that gets you to $557.79. All right. But there's a 20% VAT included. So now let's multiply that $558 roughly times 0.8. And then, yeah, look, like you get to the same price, guys. I mean, like, I'm sorry, like in my experience, it's within $1. And I'll just let you guys, I know this because like some of my pricing leaks come from countries outside the US and I convert it to US and it is always what ends up leaking. I mean, actually happening. So there really isn't much of a plus 5%. You have to include the 20% VAT for the UK, for example, after you convert to US dollars or before, whatever. And then you also have to keep in mind that depending on the state, it's another 5 to 10%, usually around 6% or something. Like I think in Tennessee, where I live, it's like 6%, 6.5%. In Nashville, they've upped it for infrastructure spending. So once you account for that, I find that the pricing is usually within $1. So I don't know. Every now and then I just think I have to remind people that there's VAT included in some countries, not included in some countries, and you have to convert between currencies. They're usually pretty close if it's a major country. Let me see here. But to answer your question, Technolabs, remove that 5%. Yeah, I mean, I expect the pricing to be roughly the same in most countries. I will say consoles, they tend to charge more, though, lately, I've noticed. But again, that's because of the strength of currencies. So, all right. Rising Miles writes in and says, RTX 4090 owner who has an ATX 3.0 power supply. Let me put a new timestamp here for this one. ATX 3.1, 5090. And with a native 12 VH power cable. Should I upgrade to ATX 3.1 for the 5090? I don't imagine you'll need to. There will be adapters. It will work fine. If you want the latest features and stuff, but I've got a 750 watt SFX Platinum Corsair power supply. SFX are the small one for my compact desktop. I just got a Corsair 12 pin. What's the 12? I guess it would be, yeah, I think it's 12 pin or whatever it is, or 12 plus 4 pin or whatever for my 4090. Plugged it in to the rail and it works fine, and I think you'll be able to upgrade again just fine. I wouldn't get a new power supply for the 5090 unless your power supply is like a 500 watt, but you have 4090, so I doubt it's 500 watts, is it? Job writes in, hi, Tom. I hope you and the team had a good holiday season. We did. It was actually very relaxing. Based on current information, do you think the 4090 will hold their values on the used market relative to their other 40 series cards? Depending on 5090 reviews, I may want to upgrade. So when would be the best time to sell my 4090? Now, if that's what you care about is price. I may hand it down to the kids. Your kids have quite a good graphics card. Let me tell you that one. But my take is this. If you're thinking of selling your RTX 4000 series cards, I think it's going to matter a lot on which card it is. I think the 4090, relatively speaking, is going to hold its value for at least a few months. What does that mean? I wouldn't be surprised if it went down in price some, but I think it's going to hold the 1600 MSRP or at least $1,500 mark on eBay for a bit here. Because look, it has 24 gigabytes of RAM. Even if you get the 5080, so it has 16 gigs, 24 gigs is more, probably similar performance. So it's going to hold its value. If like the 5080 16 gigabyte is 1300. I bet the 4090 holds 14, 1500 for a bit here. Because the 5090 is probably going to just be priced a whole tier above it with 32 gigs of RAM. All right, so that's the 50, that's the 4090 though. Now, when it comes to like the 4070, I think that one's going to drop in price though. Like, I think new 4070s may go up in price only because the supply's gone. But at least on eBay, and I'm curious, what are they selling for on eBay right now? They might actually be artificially high because supply isn't there, because Nvidia just hasn't been making, has stopped Lovelace production a long time ago, like I leaked. Let's see. 4070, 12 gigabyte. Yeah, I mean, it's basically selling for MSRP on eBay because you can't get them that easily anymore all the time. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's what's happening now, but I'm sorry. It's hard for me to believe that, like, when the 5070 comes out for like 600, when the 9070 XT comes out for 500 or $600, that these aren't going to get pushed down by those graphics cards in a way the 4090 won't, because it's still above the around the 5080, and AMD is not competing with the 5080. So I don't think you should be rushed to sell your 4090. But if you had something like a 4060, yeah, look, the cheaper the card is, the less value it's going to hold once well, it's really the mid-range ones that will get hit the hardest, I think, actually, because the 5060 isn't coming out right away. So yeah, that's my prediction for pricing. All right, let's see here. Coal Addict writes in and says, "Do you plan on buying an RTX 50 or RDNA 4 card, or is it too soon for an upgrade for you?" Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'll tell you what. If I, here's how I'll put it. If I look on Newegg in a month and I see a 5090 32 gigabyte for $2,000, and I see 4090 selling for $2,000 on eBay, yeah, I guess I probably will. Like, I use it for work. It's not for gaming though. I'm not doing this for gaming. Um, I'll probably go to a 5090 if I can break even. I mean, I did that with the 390X to the 480. I sold the 390X for 300 bucks, got a 480 for 272. I think it was 240. And I got the same performance with less power usage a week after I sold it and saved 60 bucks, or made, you could argue, 60 bucks. That's how I'm going to look at it. If the 5090 though is $3,000 and the 4090 sells for 1,600 on eBay, I don't think so. I don't need more performance, and it renders my videos so quickly. If I can break even or spend $100, $200 net, I mean, it is for work, so I probably would. But that's pretty much it. Yeah. All right, let us move on then to some CPU questions here. Put down a new timestamp. Uh-oh. Bless me. All right. Spencer Walker 21 writes in and says, "Wasn't making fun of the new GPUs. They're dope, my bro. Is getting the 5090 and a 9950 X3D build. It was a self-depreciating humor because I'm struggling. I'm on the struggle bus with Alan Wake 2, a la a switch port on the deck." Yeah. Well, okay. I understand now. Let me see here. So Bfish writes in and asks, "What are you hearing about Strix Halo?" Well, actually, let me, before you get to that, let me make sure I'm not missing any other tipped questions. I know there are more. Confused Council writes in and says, "Games like Karateka and Oregon Trails got 80s kids like me interested in learning programming. Well, the same thing happened today with the prohibited costs of gaming PCs. What will draw in the next generation?" Oh, I'm glad I went to this first. This is a really interesting question. Let me see here. Let's see, into programming, pricing. So I'm actually going to have probably a surprising take for you, Confused Council. Thank you for not being confused and writing in today. Um, I think plenty of kids are going to get into programming. And I think it's because you're forgetting that you don't need a 4090. Like, you can, get a PS5 for 380, or I think the Series S should be cheaper, but it's 350 or less. And, you can get like a mini PC, like something like this, like, this is the Strix one. It's probably like $900 on minis for 'em right now. It is actually the fastest system I've ever used in terms of snappiness. So it's pretty cool, but certainly not the most budget PC. But I've also seen like Rembrandt versions that are, of course, only like 40% weaker, still around as strong as an RX 470 mini PCs, going for like 300 bucks. And from that perspective, I actually think it's never been easier to play games. Yes, a Rembrandt Zen 3 Plus APU is not going to game max settings. But in my experience, it can at least do 720p 60 high or ultra, 1080p 60, some mix of low and medium most of the time. And it can do that. It's a desktop. It's not even a console. That's the minimum to actually have fun. And I know, some people are like, well, that's not 120 hertz, whatever. I know. Hey, I'm someone that games on OLED 120 hertz to like 160, 240 hertz monitors. No one needs to tell me that higher refresh rates are better. But there used to be a time where, well, gamers on PC with like $1,000 PCs were gaming at 144 hertz. Console gamers are getting by with sub 1080p 30. You can do 60 now with $300 mini PCs. Yes, lower settings, but I think that's what the more likely thing is that's going to get kids into gaming. Or even just, stuff like soon the Switch 2. I know the Switch 1 is long in the tooth and struggling to run games, but ultimately the Switch 1 has somehow managed to run Hogwarts Legacy. And if you're a little kid playing that on the go, you're going to want to know how you could play this game that's so big on your handheld. And I think that's what's going to get people into gaming more so than Oregon Trail, which in the 80s, how much did your PC cost? I remember my parents' IBM PC when I was a kid. It's like $2,000-$3,000. That thing ran games like crap. So yeah, I mean, yes, you had your Oregon Trails on the one desktop in your parents' room that everyone shared the same PC. I'm old enough to remember those days, but that PC was really expensive and the kids had to go into their parents' room or, remember the boomer kitchen layout? I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just like my parents' house 20 years ago, every kitchen had like a desk built into the kitchen. Anyone remember this design before we went into open concept houses? It's just hilarious. There's always this like little desk to the side of something in every kitchen, like 20 years ago when they built houses in the 2000s. And that was the desktop the whole family shared. Like, that wasn't a lot of access. I think there's a lot more avenues to get kids interested in programming now than there used to be. Yes, the 5090 is expensive, but you can also get this for $200 to $300 and play a lot better games than Oregon Trail. Let me see here. What other question do we have? Gaming Nader says, I don't like the 16 gigabytes of VRAM for the 5080. Again, if it was a grand, even then, that's a lot. $900. There's no such thing as a bad product, just a bad price. I agree. If it's over 1200, it should have 24 gigabytes of RAM. I agree. Gaming Nader, thank you for writing in. Ricardo Hernandez writes in and says, I think the 5070 Ti could be considered better than the 5080 if you consider price performance. What would be the sweet spot for the 5070 Ti? I mean, look, guys, what do you want me to say? The sweet spot for a 16 gigabyte 5070 Ti, which, what have I been told? I've been told the 5070 12 gigabyte might edge out the 4070 Ti. I don't remember what the rumored specs are for the 5070 Ti, though. I think I would expect it to be like 30%, 20 to 30% faster than that. So let me go here. So if let's just assume, right, let me see here. 4070 Ti tech power up. If we just assume the 4070 Ti is around what the 5070 will be, even add a percent or two, and we add 30% to that, then the 5070 Ti, yeah, I mean, I think the 5070 Ti is going to be around 4080, 4080 super performance. So what would be the sweet spot? I mean, I think you want at least 30% better price performance, gen over gen, probably. And so I think I like 699 is what I would want it to be, right? I like the 5070 getting 12 gigabytes. I'm sorry, that's insulting if it's above 500. Uh, I think the sweet spot would be the 5070 12 gigabyte at 499 or 449, and the 5070 Ti 16 gigabyte, assuming it does match the 4080 Super, being like $700-$600, so that it's like a premium version of whatever RDNA 4 ends up being. But I think it's going to be $799. That's what I've been told. It's probably going to be that or higher. So the sweet spot is probably not what I think Nvidia will go with. We'll see. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Nvidia goes 500 and 700 or X 600 and 450. I don't think they will, though. I think Nvidia is not going to be aggressive with pricing with anything that's even slightly above the RDNA 4's performance. Alderon Matt writes in again and says, "Why do so many Intel Arc defenders assert that resizable bar is a good thing to require and it's more future proof? More restrictions on a GPU at any decent level seems bad for gamers." Yeah, I mean, I look, resizable bar is something supported by pretty much all modern platforms. So I don't think it's the end of the world anymore. I think that was a much bigger issue for Alchemist. But why would they say it's a good thing to require for future proofing? I don't know, because they're coping. All these Battlemage questions, I don't know, cope is my answer. I don't really have much to say. Um, so we got that. We got that. We got a tip here from LCC Gaming. Thank you for the tip. All right, now let me start rolling through some more of these CPU questions. Let me add a timestamp here. Da, da, da. Again, everybody, remember this is sponsored by Micro Center. Click the links in the description. Check out their deals to support the channel and like the video. There's almost 2,300 of you watching. Like the video. Let's get to 2,000 likes and double check the thousands of you watching. Double check your subscribe to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel. Consider joining the Patreon as well. Actually, the person who just wrote in, Alderon Matt, he works at he's a game dev and he's going to discuss programming for Battlemage and all these new launches. So you can ask that guest questions. I'm going to put out the request for questions for the next Broken Silicon guest in like an hour. So join the Patreon now as well. Lowest tier, $2 a month gets you access to that and die shrinks. All right, CPU questions it is. Bfish writes in, what are you hearing about Strix Halo adoption? The Asus leak made it look like it was only in the Z13, and it's been one leaked in an HP model. Given that Strix Point and Zen 5 X3D are both out, I'd have thought this would have the most buzz. Well, I think you have to remember that. Yeah, so let's talk about Strix Halo adoption actually a bit here. Do not forget that you can put, I believe, correct me in the Moore's Law is Dead Discord right now if I'm wrong. I believe Strix Point, the APU in this mini PC here, this can drop into Hotpoint or Phoenix sockets, meaning any HP Omnibook that was already designed, like any of these like basic 14-inch laptops that had Phoenix and then Hotpoint, boom, throw Strix into it. There's not a lot of redesigning needed. It's no surprise that Strix has massive adoption and support. AMD's been building up that socket and the support for it for years now. So of course it can get a lot of adoption. Strix Halo requires really specific, a new socket. Really, you need to maximize Strix Halo. You really do need to like build the chassis around it now. It's completely different requirements. You don't need you don't need a dedicated GPU anymore at all. Like, so it's gonna probably have a longer lead time into adoption a bit. Like we saw back when AMD started getting into things with like Renoir and Cezanne and Rembrandt, right? Renoir comes out, it was in a few key gaming laptops. Cezanne comes out, boom, it's in way more. Rembrandt comes out, hard to get, not easy. But then a year after Phoenix is out and Hotpoint, boom, Hotpoint's everywhere because finally the infrastructure's there. So I wouldn't read into it too much right away. The way to read into Strix Halo is how much are they hyping it up and what's the volume on the models that do exist. Because at least at first, it would not surprise me if like Lenovo had one or two models, HP had a couple models, Asus had a couple models, and that's it. But they push those models super hard because that's what Strix Halo is. It is not this thing that can just jump into any other chassis they built over the past 5 years. So what I can tell you is that OEMs are incredibly excited about Strix Halo. Like I especially think like Lenovo and HP and Asus are. So yeah, I don't have anything to say except that they are excited about this. And I would read more into the volume on the models that do exist than assuming because some brand new platform doesn't have a million models, that's some issue. We'll have to see. Question generated by Jensen GPT writes in and says, I've been saying since Lunar Lake was first announced that it would be perfect for handheld PCs. It's the first Intel lineup in a long time. Let me write down a timestamp for Lunar Lake. And that is genuinely interested and excited me. The review embargo for the 2025 MSI Claw with Lunar Lake just lifted, and independent reviews have shown huge increases in performance and efficiency. We can't go much. You can only go up from 0 over Meteor Lake. But also Hawkpoint and Phoenix. I would hope so. Phoenix is last gen. In these power-constrained handheld PCs, the graphics is competitive with the 890M and Strix, but it has fewer and less powerful CPU cores, so the GPU is never starving for power. Does AMD have anything releasing in 2025 that should take a similar design approach to Lunar Lake for handhelds and ultra thin laptops? Strix is a great lineup, but it definitely focuses a lot more on the CPU performance than it does balancing out the GPU and CPU performance for lower power budgets. And it doesn't perform extremely well when you're only giving it 10 to 30 watts. Well, that's not true. It actually performs very well at 30 watts. It's actually kind of its sweet spot in efficiency. It's trading blows with Lunar Lake in efficiency a lot of the time, unless you have the very, very top Lunar Lake model that's almost never used. Well, Lunar Lake handhelds that without breaking a sweat. Um, I would just say the Z2 Extreme isn't out yet, right? Like, let me look this up. MSI Claw, the Fox, because actually I haven't watched this review yet, and I would like to check real quick here. Da-da-da-da-da. Let's see the definitive review. All right, wow, 45 minutes long, but let me see what we got here. Let me look at some benchmarks. All right. So looking at the Fox here, oh, of course, there is an ad from Factor. Why did I say that? They didn't sponsor me. They have sponsored me before though. Okay, so I'm seeing here at 25 watts, the Intel 258V is not beating in Cyberpunk the 155H. That's not good. This, I just went to a rant. The first graph I saw in the video, dude, and it's not Deus Ex Mankind Divided. Okay, that's more like it. Here it's crushing the Meteor like MSI Claw by like 50%. That is what I would have expected because Meteor Lake was terrible below 30 watts, just god awful. Yeah, okay. Horizon Zero Dawn. Yeah, wow, we got like a 50% increase, but like, let me see, where is the Strix comparison here? All right, Z1 Extreme, but that's Phoenix. All right, so again, wow, in Cyberpunk Lunar Lake does not look good. I'm just looking at the Fox video here. In fact, let me so people can follow along. I will put this in the chat. There, I just sent you the guys the video I'm looking at. And if I look at Cyberpunk, in fact, I'll even send you guys the timestamp to where I'm at for those watching, so we can follow along here. All right. So if you have a secondary monitor, you can pull it up at that timestamp. I'm seeing here at the timestamp I sent, the Z1 Extreme beating Lunar Lake by over 10% at 20 watts. Remember, that's not even Hawk Point, that's Phoenix. All right, so let me go to a different game. It's one game, to be fair. All right, now I'm at Deus Ex Mankind Divided. Again, the ROG Ally wins with Phoenix. Again, it wins in Horizon Zero Dawn. It loses a lot in Returnal. And then, all right. And then if I move on to Strix, I am seeing it crush it. Am I missing something here? Did someone look at a different review? Maybe someone in the Moore's Law Discord can help me out here. But what I am seeing is that Strix is pillaring Lunar Lake in 20 watt mode, which actually surprises me. Returnal, Strix ties Lunar Lake. And this isn't even undervolted. Yeah, look, it's a lot better than Meteor Lake, but Meteor Lake lost to Phoenix and even Rembrandt, I believe, at 20 watts. So unless I'm missing something here, this person mentioned the Fox, and I'm not seeing crazy results here. So I don't know. I don't think AMD needs to, and here's why. Let's assume the review I looked at was, you're going to accuse the Fox of bias, or I don't know. I only just looked at one review for 1 minute live in front of you. I'm not going to take that as my overall opinion. I'm not trying to trash Lunar Lake. I actually like Lunar Lake. But based on seeing that, it's just one review. But guys, the Z2 Extreme isn't out yet. Remember, the Z1 Extreme was a voltage bend optimized version of Phoenix that beat Meteor Lake into the dust in a handheld. So what is AMD going to do to respond? They're going to launch the special bend versions of Strix with the Z2 Extreme. I think it's going to do fine from what I'm seeing here. But thank you for writing in about that. And then AI Soldier writes in, Tom, have you seen the review of the MSI Claw 8 AI Plus from the Fox? As a device, it will likely be the best handheld if it weren't for the Battlemage driver problems. Will force AMD to optimize their drivers further for handheld devices. For optimize for handheld devices, I just think AMD is going to want to do that whether Intel's competing or not. I guess that would provide a little extra competition. But again, I think the only thing AMD needs to do to compete with the Lunar Lake handhelds is have a special version of Strix that they haven't even launched yet. Bacon House Collective writes in, "Hey Tom, who will make an APU first that can achieve parity with 8-core and 7900 XTX and ultra settings games, AMD or Nvidia?" So first of all, which 8-core? Again, in my testing, this 12-core Strix APU crushed Hawk Point 8 cores and therefore, Zen 3 8 cores and even matched Zen 4 desktop 8 cores in performance, even in gaming. So no, they've already done that. But basically, I like this part of your question. Who is going to make an APU with 7900 XTX performance first, AMD or Nvidia? And let me see. If we assume 4060 Ti is the performance Strix Halo will hit, where is it here? Is it not listed right away? All right, let me do this. 4060 Ti tech power up. All right, there we go. Well, let me do 16 gigabytes so that, you know, we avoid the VRAM issues. All right, 4060 Ti, 16 gigabyte. All right, so that's where I think Strix Halo, if pushed hard, will be able to hit, 4060 Ti desktop performance without VRAM issues. And then how much stronger is a 7900 XTX according to Tech Power Up? Double the performance, roughly. Okay. Who will do that first? Well, I've heard rumors about Medusa Halo. Huh. I believe Nvidia is going to try to launch at the end of this year, as I've already leaked, a 4070 laptop, so 4060 Ti performance APU. Maybe a little weaker than Strix Halo is kind of the indication I was given. So that's Nvidia at the end of this year. I think probably CES next year we might see AMD announce Medusa APUs with Zen 6 and presumably RDNA 4 or UDNA graphics. I would gun up to my head, I'd say AMD. AMD will have an APU twice as strong as Strix Halo first, is what I'm basically saying. But I'm not 100% sure because I know from the sounds of it, from talking to people at Nvidia, and people who have been briefed at OEMs by Nvidia about their new APU, that at first Nvidia is kind of more targeting like mid-range Strix Halo performance, not real top end, but like, with Nvidia AI features and so on to try to sell the laptop. But I also know they're working on much stronger stuff later. So I wouldn't 100% say Nvidia will be second, but I think AMD will probably double Strix Halo performance in an APU before Nvidia does. But it would not surprise me if like, next year we have Zen 6 Halo APUs and then just half a year later, Nvidia has some monster APU as well. It wouldn't surprise me, but I assume AMD will be first. Mark Smith writes in, will AM4, AM5 become like AM4, or will it not support as many generations? Well, already, what do we have? Zen 4, Zen 5, and I'm 99% sure Zen 6. I think AMD said Zen 6 basically, right? And I've already leaked that too. So that's 3 generations. What do we have before? Zen 1, Zen Plus, Zen 2, Zen 3. Could argue X3D, but I'm not going to count X3D as its own generation with AM4 because, well, then what am I going to count them as their own generations with Zen 5 and Zen 4? I don't think we should. I think it was kind of fair to count it as a generation back in the day when X3D is new. It's not new anymore. So that's, 1 plus 2, 3. 4 generations on AM4. And we're going to get at least 4, 5, 6 on AM5. With some suggestion, maybe Zen 7, but I'm not sure about that. I'd be 50-50 on that one. So I don't know. And we don't know if there will be a Zen 6 Plus. There could be, or a Zen 5 Plus. I think it's going to be similar. It's going to feel similar. Maybe I don't think it will last quite as long as AM4 did for many reasons I'm not going to go over again. But it's still like, what? AM4 came out in 2022, or AM5 came out in 2022. It's been 3 years. It'll be here at least through 26. So look, you're going to get 4 or 5 years out of this motherboard. I think that's reasonable. And I think it'll mostly feel like the same thing, but long term, not quite the same thing because AMD has to keep making Zen 3 forever for their old contracts of Epic with Zen 3 Milan. So that's why I think that would shift to not quite really last as long, but it's still kind of in practice last as long if you want a newer CPU, not something like the 5900 XT, which is, I know it's a new Zen 3 CPU, but is it really new? I don't know. Let me see here. Let's finish these CPU questions here. This one's actually a pretty important one that I saw over break. I still haven't paid that much attention to this, but I think it's pretty bad, so we have to talk about it here. Let's see. Quick Jumper writes in, "Hello, Tom. How did Intel's fixes manage to worsen the performance of Arrow Lake even more? Maybe Intel has some to-do list of things it can still fuck up, but from management standpoint, how did this happen? So what Quick Jumper is referencing, and I did see this pop up in my feed over break, is that this new fix Intel's supposed to have for Arrow Lake actually like drop performance, I believe, by up to 18%. And my answer is, I don't know. I don't know, but there's your long-term Intel driver support, people. I don't know. I Let's not bash Intel any more than we have to. Let's just say what I think. Let's just be honest. Arrow Lake has fundamental flaws. I don't think they're going to fix all of them. I've been told directly by people at Intel that there are massive latency problems communicating between the tiles. No update is going to completely fix that. That's it. That's all I have to say. And so let's just leave it at that. Do I think they'll be able to improve performance in some games here and there? Yeah, of course. What? There was like a 30% uplift in Cyberpunk, right? Sure. But I think that was the devs fixing their own code. Same thing happened with Zen 5. Zen 5 came out. There were 30% performance regressions in some games from Zen 4 to Zen 5. Those have been fixed. But in addition to that, AMD has had pretty big latency uplifts and fixes, and that's made Zen 5% truly Zen 5% or better. Whereas Arrow Lake, I just look, I think I'll get some fixes here and there, but there's just an inherent flaw in that design, and it is there. No update's going to completely fix that. You can only try to mitigate it. Wolfie writes in, I'm really curious if you still have Intel contacts that have any info on what they plan to do with their smaller CPUs. My favorite post 12th gen product is hands down the N100 or N200 chips. But despite there already being two of the new Core Ultra generations out and still no signs of replacements for those, wasn't there something called Twin Lake coming out? I think I may have even leaked that. I don't remember. But I think I was asked this before recently. Yeah, I've been told that there's going to be other all little core generations. I'm just being honest with you. It's not something I follow that closely, though. If it were to come out right away, right? If there was an Intel APU that was, what are they on right now? Skymont, I believe. If it had like 8 Skymont cores in a cluster, no big cores, and then it had integrated graphics 80% as good as Lunar Lake. So basically trying to get you most of Lunar Lake's performance um at 2/3 the price or something, like half the price or something, in like budget handhelds. That'd be really cool. The problem is that these all Atom CPUs seem to come out a year or two after that generation of architecture is already out. And that's what makes me not that interested in it. They have their use, if you don't need super CPU performance, but you want to, generally speaking, be snappy. I tested some, I think, AOC mini PC that had 4, I think it was not Gracemont, but 4 whatever was in Alder Lake. Oh, it would have been Gracemont, I think, cores, and I thought it performed like my old i5. It seemed fine, but that came out years after it was already out, and it was for like a budget $150 mini PC. So I just don't really follow that stuff that closely. All right, let me see here. So we got some more GPU questions here. Actually, let me text someone who just tried to call me. Where is he? Forgive me for the dead air, people. Come on. A live stream. All right. Sorry. Forgive me. The real Max Coy writes in and asks, just upgraded to a 3440 by 1440 OLED monitor, but I still have an 8 GB 3070 Ti. I was hoping to upgrade soon with a budget of $600. Do you see an obvious upgrade? Yeah, I do. It's funny though. Like, I can see kind of why you held on to it as long as you did, because like, what's the cheap option? A 4060 Ti, 16 gigabyte? Like, okay, but then you're spending 450 for like the same less performance actually, but more VRAM. I guess you could have gotten a 7900 XT for 650. That would have almost been within your budget. You'd have had over double the RAM. And that would have been like what? 40% faster or something. Yeah, I think you may have waited. You're not in 4K, so that's good. You can probably make do with the VRAM a little better than a 4K monitor. I think RDNA 4 is going to be the obvious upgrade for you. Like, look, they're going to, like, where's the 3070 Ti? I have Tech Power pulled up here. Let me see. 3070 Ti. So where is the 79? Well, let's just put 4070 Ti Super. So yeah, you could get like 50 to 60% more performance. 60 to 70% more performance probably, while getting double the VRAM, cutting down your power consumption a lot probably, or probably overall power consumption a little. I bet if you overclock, RDNA 4 can still use 300 watts. Yeah, I think RDNA 4 is the obvious upgrade. That would be my answer to you. Especially if you're worried about VRAM, because I wouldn't get a 12 gigabyte card if your 8 gigabyte card's running out of space. Da, da, da. All right, let's see here. Eric Winberg writes and it says, "Thanks, Tom, to the Ella, and also thank you to the Moore's Law is Dead team. I have a 9900X build that came together on New Year's Day. I am very happy with it." Yeah, that's one of those underappreciated CPUs with how cheap they are right now, isn't it? I'm kind of curious. Going to Micro Center here. How much is a 9900X? Like midway through the generation, or it's not even midway, just after an initial launch, these are usually the CPUs that have the best deals, is 12 cores. All right, so $400 for the 9900X on Micro Center. I'm not seeing a crazy deal with it here, but I guess I will check one thing. How much is the 7900X? So that is, oh, still 400. I guess Micro Center probably put up prices a little bit after Christmas. Huh. Yeah. 9900X. All right. Yeah, no, it seems to be about $400 or something if you look around right now. I suppose that's, $200 less than the 9950X. Well, I'm glad you are enjoying your build. I wonder if you got a good deal on it though, because I know before New Year's Eve there were some pretty nuts ones that came with RAM. Malkov writes in and says, "Did you see the leak of an XTX prototype from AMD?" XTX prototype, AMD. I don't know. Did I? Oh, 7900 XTX prototype leaked. Well, no, that's an old one. Here's a Navi 48 one, supposedly. I don't know. I do not think I did. No. I mean, I've seen various prototypes leak that never came out, but without you telling me which XTX, you're gonna have to narrow it down, Malcolm, because there's been a lot of prototypes that have been leaked. Da-da-da. All right, so that is all of the tipped questions. Let me get back to a couple of the remaining Patreon questions. I think we already answered this one, but let's read it anyways. Planet 9 writes, and it says, "With all the Switch 2 news in such a short amount of time, have you received any new information or confirmations of recent leaks?" Yeah, right. I already answered that from a tipped question. No, not really. But just my update is pretty much everything I said about performance boosting, really high on its stock, focusing on 4K DLSS output. None of that changes. If it turns out they die shrunk it to a smaller Samsung node, wouldn't surprise me. I've speculated for a while that I could see that happening. Okay, Shay writes in, "Do you see leading edge process nodes getting too crowded or expensive, and Nvidia and AMD hold consumer chips back on older nodes?" You could kind of argue they are. Right, like AMD did the 7600. Let me see, upgrading advice. Let me put down, this is a timestamp as well. Node expenses. So already, right, we have AMD selling the 7600 on 6 nanometer, below 5 nanometer of the rest of RDNA 3. Also, Nvidia has chosen to not go with 3 nanometer for Blackwell. Originally they were, I was told, going to go 3 nanometer. Same thing with Strix. Strix Point originally was going to be all 3 nanometer. Now it just seems like Strix Halo will for the IO die probably. So you already see these companies choosing to use older nodes for consumer products here and there. Outside of that, though, I mean, I think there's two things that are going to happen. You're going to see that a little bit more, I'm sure. There will be like 4 nanometer here, 3 nanometer at the top of the stack or something. But I just interviewed Daniel Nenny. He's the foremost expert on fabrications with a million sources in the industry. He's a veteran. He wrote the book on fabs. So, and on Broken Silicon, he said that he agreed with me that there might be too much capacity. Like everyone has built up all this capacity. TSMC built a ton of it. And then the CHIPS Act funded Intel building all this capacity across the United States that they don't really have contracts for. So a hot take I might have is, unless you want the cutting edge node, meaning 3 nanometer right now or 2 nanometer in a year. Like, I think there might be oversupply, especially of 6 nanometer and a little bit of 4 eventually. So I don't think they're gonna go that far back in nodes because I don't think they need to. We've seen reports of TSMC lowering prices on some of these nodes as well. Again, the very top 2 nanometer, yeah, I guess we'll see what happens with Zen 6. I doubt the whole lineup would be 2 nanometer. I think I basically somewhat confirmed that with Medusa leak that it's 3 nanometer, but I don't think we should worry that much about capacity constraints right now for anything that's almost leading edge, meaning like Intel 4, Intel 18A soon, and 20A. I guess they're skipping 20A, right? And like 4 nanometer, because I just think in a drive for Intel to prove they can beat TSMC and a drive for TSMC to beat their competition into the dust after the pandemic, I think everyone just built all this capacity. And from what I'm hearing, they might have a little too much of some of it. So that's what I would expect. All right. Let me see if there's any final questions here. If you are in the Moore's Law is Dead Discord, which remember you get access to at the lowest tier on the Patreon, is $2 a month. You can join it right now and ask questions for free on the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon. In the after video chat section, feel free to put any last minute questions. And again, if you're in the live stream and you want to do a tips question, throw that in now, because you can already tell, I think, that I'm running out of steam and I need to post the questions for the guests that are on Sunday. But I'll give you guys another 5 or 10 minutes here. Da, da, da. Let's see. Someone says sell your 50. Now I need to buy Nvidia stock. Maybe. We'll see. You never know. That's a bubble that's going to pop, but who knows? It's hard to call that. Will DLSS 4 be 5000 series exclusive? It would surprise me if there wouldn't be some feature that is. Da, da, da. Stoff writes in the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon. Thank you for supporting me there. And says, since the 5000 series will use a more efficient node instead of jumping to 3 nanometer, like more efficient 4 nanometer than the one before. Yeah. Do you think the 6000 series will use 3 nanometer or sleep to 2 nanometer? I'm not sure what you mean. I'm not sure what you mean by 6000 series. Oh, you must mean by Nvidia. So if Nvidia is using N4, or is it 4NP? Is what I believe it was called for the 5000 series. Will they use 3 nanometer for 6000 or 2 nanometer for 6000? That's a very interesting question. Let me write down a timestamp for that one. RTX 6000 node. So, what node will Nvidia use after Blackwell? It's hard to say, because I am hearing that 2 nanometer is going really well. And again, Daniel Nenny backed this up when he came on the podcast a couple times here, is that he is also hearing, in addition to me, that like a lot of customers are going to 3 nanometer right now, but also a lot of 4 nanometer. Like they're not wanting to move everything to 3, only their highest performing stuff or really densest stuff. Like why would they put Zen 5C on 3 nanometer? Because it's mostly logic you're shrinking. So that's why they would do that. And then keep normal Zen 5 on 4 nanometer. I'm hearing a lot of stuff about 2 nanometer. I still think that there's going to be a consumer 3 nanometer chiplet, but it honestly wouldn't surprise me if Nvidia went to 2 nanometer or something. But I would be surprised if their entire generation did. So I don't know. I don't want to speculate on things I don't know for sure, stuff. But I will say that it would not surprise me, your question here for the RTX 6000, if there was 2 nanometer products, because I hear a lot of customers are moving quicker to 2 nanometer than they did to 3 from 4. All right, let's see. Any other questions? Why did someone send me this? Let me see. Any word on the 9950X3D? I mean, they're about to announce it, aren't they? It will be the fastest, CPU overall, probably. I don't need a source to tell you that. Anyone ever told you you kind of look like Superman? Well, which Superman? I don't think I look like Henry Cavill. I mean, that's thank you for the compliment, but I think he's probably better looking than me. I would say. Um, DLSS performance of scan to 4K means you are a 1080p gamer. All right, dude. Cool. Did he already take a stab at 5090 pricing? I did, Nona. It's in the beginning. 5090 I predict would be 2200. Yeah, there's something about that price that kind of sounds not reasonable, but like it has a ring to it. Will the resurgence in crypto mining materially affect demand for this generation of GPUs? Well, which crypto mining for which coin? Bitcoin uses ASICs and Ethereum's off in la land. So I think you got to worry about AI more than crypto right now. Of course, famous last words. Who knows if some new coin, there was a barbecue coin, comes out and like that does something again. But Perplex D it cuts your name off, but thank you for the tip. Yes. With the ever lowering size of process nodes, do you think GPU manufacturers should increase GPU release cadence to every 4 years? Ever lowering size of process nodes, do you think? No, I think the 2-year cadence is working out pretty well for these companies. I don't really see that changing. I think they're all kind of going to settle into that. Taman Atiam sends something, writes in, thank you for the tip, and says 6700 XT or 3070 for 1080p. I'm sorry, I just can't recommend an 8 GB card. And actually, here's the funny thing: the 3070 pulls at back in the day, the 3070 pulled ahead of the 6700 XT in 4K if you didn't have VRAM issues, right? Like that's actually when the 3070 was at its best. I had a 3070. It was great, right before all the VRAM issues that predictably were going to happen actually started happening. The 3070 is a great 4K card if it had enough RAM, but it doesn't. So at that point, I say 6700 XT. Yeah, definitely. Like in 1080p, RDNA 2 is a murderer. So you want to go with that. Reese C writes in and says, are the single cache CCDs on the 12 and 16 core issues mostly over now? With scheduler updates, the 12 core being 6 and 6 worries me. I would have to assume they are, or AMD wouldn't be doing this. That's my assumption. It's an assumption. I'm not promising you anything, but if the 9950 X3D only has one CCD with Vcache, which it sounds like that's what they've decided to do, which is unfortunate, by the way. I was told that it was like a 50-50 chance they go with the other one, but I wasn't told 50-50. I was just told they were considering it, so I guess I don't know what the chance was. But if they are going with one CCD with Vcache, it has to mean they've improved scheduling. I think it has to. Any news about the 9950 X3D? I just answered your 9950 X3D question. I'll even put a timestamp here. 9950 X3D thoughts. And then let me check the Discord one more time. No, I'm not seeing any questions there. Companies. Would a 5070 18 gigabyte use more power? I think the extra RAM modules slightly increases it, but this was a bigger deal back in the day. So for those who don't remember, there was the 69 HD 6970 1 GB and 2 GB, or 6950, I believe actually, and there were 6870 2 GB, 6870 1 GB, and the 69 and 7850 1 GB, 7850 2 GB. Look them up. Look up 7850 1 GB reviews. You will see, I believe, if I remember correctly, that in power consumption testing, the 2 GB versions of these mid-range to high-end graphics cards a decade ago would increase power consumption by like 5 to 20 watts. And that's because there's extra memory modules that need to be powered. Now, the memory we have now is much more efficient, much better at only using energy when it needs to. So from that perspective, yes, it will probably use more power, but not much. So, and we don't know if the 5070 18 gigabyte, if that comes out, if that would also have more CUDA cores enabled or something. Probably not, but it could. So that would also cause more power usage. But how much more power? 5 watts, 10 watts. In effect, not really. Stevens Requiem writes in and says, "Do you think the 5090 will be able to run Cyberpunk 2077 at 4K native with everything in max settings? Will pricing be announced on Monday for the 5000 series?" If they reveal everything, I would assume they're going to reveal pricing. Um, or at least I'd be surprised if they didn't. Now, will the 5090 be able to run Cyberpunk 2077 at 4K? I mean, guys, when you guys use a game, an unoptimized game like Cyberpunk that had a horrible launch, and then you're like max settings, I don't think that's always a fair thing to compare. It's like I can always find some insane setting in almost any game that will crush any GPU. I mean, I remember back in the day when I gamed in 1080p on a 7970, which was when 1440p wasn't really that obtainable for a reasonable price compared to 1080p, and 1080p was still considered high resolution. I remember there were games that were so easy to run on my 7970 that like I would turn on super sampling times 4 times 8. But does that mean that I need a stronger card because I turned on some ridiculous setting? No, not really. Let me look here. Cyberpunk max settings ray tracing 4090 benchmark. I mean, what does it get? There's got to be a million videos of people trying this out, right? Cyberpunk 4K ray tracing overdrive. Let's see. What is it getting? Well, there's an ad there. To put one more timestamp, I suppose, since we are definitely on a new subject. 5090 RT performance. All right. So what is this guy getting? All right. So max settings with a 4090. Oh, that's with DLSS quality. Does he have timestamps? Nope. Give me it with that. Well, but here's I think it's fair to turn on quality DLSS in my opinion. And it looks like he's getting pretty decent performance with a 4090 actually. So if your argument, okay, but then there in this area he's getting 60, that area 70, 60% more. I mean, yeah, I think it's going to be it again. I don't play Cyberpunk. What I believe I'm seeing here is a 4K, maybe it's overclocked, I don't know, but an RTX 4090 with quality DLSS turned on, which I think is fair, especially because it should make ray reconstruction better. With max, with a ray tracing overdrive on, get around 60 to 75 frames per second. I think the 5090 will be 50% faster than that, and ray tracing probably 70% or more faster. Yeah, I mean, I think that will be you'll probably do 4K 120 in it, from what I'm seeing here, as someone who doesn't play Cyberpunk, though. So take that with that caveat. Sergeant Narwan writes in, thank you for the tip. Do you think maybe NVIDIA RTX pricing is just their way to reduce consumer demand, but do a kind of paper launch to use dies on enterprise and higher margin? Um, it's not about lowering demand. It's just about they've seen the 4090 sell record numbers for a flagship card. The 4090 sold incredibly well, record numbers for a flagship, and it was the most expensive flagship NVIDIA's launched. I guess unless you count Titan Volts or the Titan RTX. From that perspective, or I guess 3090 Ti. From that perspective, they're just raising the price because they think they can get away with it, and they know that if someone's not willing to pay $2,000, $2,500 for a 5090, they know for sure they will be able to charge 5-10 grand for the professional version of that card. So I think it's less about reducing demand and just trying to pinpoint where it is at what given price. Black Sands writes in but retracts the message. Well, thank you. Let me see. Have a bunch of people attacked me for what I said about Cyberpunk in the comments. Let's see here. Native 4K with patch tracing, you get 25 frames per second. Yeah, but I think it's fair to turn on DLSS quality though. With native rasterization for a while, the compute it was only optimized for dual cores. Yeah, so I mean, if your argument is, will the 5090 do full, maxed out Cyberpunk without DLSS? Probably not, but I think it's fair to use DLSS. Don't get mad at me. That's my opinion. Will RDNA 5 be relevant when it launches? Yes. That's a weird question, Mr. W. If it is RDNA 5. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any new questions. I think I'm starting to ramble. And so I think that's where we are going to wrap up this episode of Loose Ends. So, yeah, thank you everybody for watching. Remember, hit the like button right now. Double check that you are subscribed to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel and join the Patreon. I'm about to put out questions for a developer that will be coming on to talk about optimizing for Battlemage, issues with drivers with that. And I mean, he gave me a list of things he wanted to talk about as well. How noisy ray tracing has gotten, and kernel level anti cheat, his final thoughts on PlayStation 5 Pro and Switch 2 performance. Again, this is someone who programs games to be on these consoles, so he can tell you how powerful they really are in his opinion. FSR versus DLSS, XE super sampling. Join the Patreon. $2 a month gets you access to this, and you'll of course get access to bonus content like Die Shrink. Another one came out a week ago over the break. You have hundreds of bonus episodes. A lot of them are very evergreen, even interviews with guests that you only get access to for $2 a month on the Patreon. So you also get access to the Discord as well, and can talk to me and tell me what I was wrong about directly as well if you join right now. So again, thank you everybody for watching, for listening, and yeah, CES is coming, baby. Have a good weekend, everybody.